The morning light spilled across the quiet streets of Albany as phones buzzed with a breaking alert. Just in. Democrats turn on Schumer after no kings. Rally backfires. It was one of those headlines that made everyone pause, not because they understood it, but because they didn't. Within minutes, it was everywhere, on coffee shop TVs, office group chats, and news feeds that seemed to never stop scrolling. Some thought it was satire. Others thought it was the start of something serious. Inside a small cafe near the university, 3 friends gathered by the window. Maya, a political science professor, had her laptop open but wasn't typing. Her coffee had gone cold. Across from her sat Ethan, a graphic designer with strong opinions and little patience for politics. Next to him was Clara, a social worker who believed every story had more than one truth. They weren't the kind of friends who agreed on everything, but they liked how they could talk about anything without walking out angry. "Look at this," Maya said, tilting her screen toward them. Apparently, the rally was supposed to be about accountability. No titles, no heroes, just citizens holding leaders to their word. She spoke quickly, trying to make sense of it. Ethan frowned. Then why does it sound like they attacked their own guy? If it's about equality, fine. But you can't build unity by turning on people who are on your side. Clara looked between them. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. You know how things get twisted online. One quote out of context, and suddenly it's a crisis. Maya leaned back in her chair. That's true, but this rally wasn't small. It had senators, activists, students. It was meant to be symbolic. A message that leadership isn't about worship, it's about service. Then why call it No Kings? Ethan asked. That sounds confrontational, like they're saying everyone in charge is acting like royalty. It's supposed to remind people that no one's above accountability, Maya said. It's about the principle. Clara stirred her coffee. Principles are nice, she said softly. But people don't hear principles anymore. They hear sides. At the table next to them, someone muttered, "Backfire's an understatement." The friends turned, realizing half the cafe was quietly eavesdropping. It wasn't just another headline. It was the kind of story that made everyone take a side even if they didn't want to. The cafe's TV showed clips from the rally. Crowds held signs that read, "No kings, no crowns, just accountability." At first, the energy looked hopeful. People chanting, smiling, waving flags. Then, as the footage continued, a few sound bites changed the tone. A young speaker shouted, "No one rules us, not even our own leaders!" The crowd roared. The headline writers went to work. Ethan sighed. See, that's the problem. Everything turns into a slogan before it becomes a conversation. Maya closed her laptop and stared out the window. Maybe it's because slogans are easier than nuance. People want something to chant, not something to think about. Outside, the city moved as usual. Buses rolling past, students hurrying to class, construction workers hammering on scaffolds. But the tension in the air felt heavier than normal, like everyone had absorbed the argument without realizing it. A barista turned down the TV volume. "I don't get it," she said as she wiped the counter. "Isn't it good when people hold leaders accountable?" Another worker replied, "Yeah, until it makes them look divided. Then everyone says they're weak." Maya smiled faintly. That's exactly the dilemma. Ethan checked his watch. "I just think there's a better way to talk about leadership. You don't need to tear someone down to make a point about power." "But what if that's the only way people pay attention?" Maya asked. Clara sighed, finishing her coffee. "Then maybe the real issue isn't leadership at all. Maybe it's how we react to it. How fast we turn on people. How quickly we pick sides." The conversation went quiet again. Each of them was thinking about something different but connected. Trust, truth, and how fragile both had become. The noise of the cafe filled the silence. Milk frothing, cups clinking, someone laughing too loud at a corner table. It was all so ordinary, yet the headline had made it feel like something had shifted in the air. For Maya, the story wasn't about politics anymore. It was about the human need to find someone to blame when things went wrong. For Ethan, it was about how public outrage had become entertainment. And for Clara, it was about empathy, how it was disappearing from every debate she heard. Maya checked her phone again. Comment sections were exploding. Some said the rally was brave. Others said it was betrayal. No one seemed to agree on what it meant. A student walked by the cafe window holding a cardboard sign from the rally. The words, "Power belongs to the people," were smudged by rain. He looked tired but proud. Maya watched him disappear down the street and wondered if he felt heard or misunderstood. Ethan shook his head. "This is why I hate politics," he said. "It starts with a good idea, and then everyone ruins it by trying to win the argument." Clara smiled sadly. "It's not politics that ruins it, it's people." Maya looked up. People are the only ones who can fix it too. Their table fell silent again, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind that comes right before a deeper conversation. The kind that makes you think maybe, just maybe, there's something to learn from all this noise. Outside, the wind picked up. The newspaper boxes rattled. Headlines fluttered inside their glass covers, each one screaming for attention. But for a moment, inside that cafe, the world slowed down. The three friends sat still, the weight of the morning news hanging between them like a question no one could yet answer. What happens when people demand honesty from power, but can't agree on what honesty looks like? That was the question lingering in the air as Maya finally spoke. Maybe, she said, this isn't about Schumer or the rally. Maybe it's about us, about how we decide who we trust, and what we do when that trust is tested. Clara nodded. That's the real story, she said. Ethan looked thoughtful, tapping his fingers on the table. Then maybe we should stop reading headlines, he said quietly, and start listening to each other again. For a moment, it felt like an answer. But then the cafe door opened, another phone buzzed, and the world rushed back in, fast, loud, and divided once more. Outside, somewhere beyond the noise, the echo of No Kings still lingered, fading, misunderstood, but not forgotten. The next morning, the city was buzzing again. News outlets replayed clips of the No Kings rally on every channel, each with a different spin. Some called it a bold act of honesty. Others said it was an embarrassment. Hashtags spread faster than facts, and by sunrise, the internet had already decided what had happened, though no one could quite agree on what the truth was. Maya watched the coverage from her office at the university. She had a full day of lectures ahead, but her thoughts kept circling back to the rally. The crowd had looked full of energy, students, veterans, parents, all chanting together about equality and accountability. The words were meant to unite people, but now, that same message was dividing them. Outside her window, students hurried across campus, talking animatedly about the rally. Some wore shirts that said, "Power to the people," while others had buttons supporting party unity. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. Everyone seemed to see a reflection of their own values in the story. When Maya's first class began, she decided to skip the textbook lesson and address the topic directly. She wrote 3 words on the whiteboard: leadership, loyalty, and accountability. Okay, she said, turning to her students. Let's talk about what happened yesterday. No grades, no right or wrong answers, just honesty. What do you think the rally was really about? A student in the front raised her hand immediately. It's about standing up for democracy, she said. People are tired of feeling ignored. The rally gave them a voice. A boy near the back disagreed. But if you start shouting at your own leaders, doesn't that just help your opponents? It makes your side look divided, another voice cut in. Division isn't the problem. Silence is. If you can't question your own leaders, then what kind of democracy is that? The classroom came alive with debate. Voices rising, overlapping, full of conviction. Maya watched them with a mix of pride and worry. It was good to see them engaged, but it also reminded her how fragile public trust had become. Everyone wanted to be heard, but no one wanted to be wrong. One student leaned forward and said, "Professor, you talk about accountability, but where's the line between holding someone responsible and just tearing them down?" That question quieted the room. Maya paused before answering. That's the challenge, isn't it? Accountability isn't about anger. It's about honesty. But in public debates, honesty often sounds like attack. A few heads nodded. Some didn't. The bell rang soon after, but the conversation didn't stop. Students lingered in the hallway, still arguing politely, like the debate was too big to fit into one class. After her lectures, Maya met Ethan and Clara again for lunch at a diner near campus. They'd all been following the story from different angles. Ethan was already scrolling on his phone. "You see this?" he said, showing them a video clip. "They're calling it a civil war within the party. That's all anyone cares about, the drama." Clara frowned. "They're missing the point. The rally wasn't about taking sides. It was about reminding leaders they work for the people, not above them." Ethan laughed dryly. "Sure, but no one wants to hear that nuance. Outrage gets more clicks than understanding." Maya stirred her soup. "It's strange. Everyone keeps saying they want change. But when someone tries to start a conversation about it, people panic. It's like we're afraid of disagreement." The waitress passed by, shaking her head as she glanced at the muted TV. "It's the same every time," she said. "Somebody tries to make a difference and the message gets twisted." Maya smiled faintly. Maybe that's why change feels so slow. It gets lost in the noise. Back on campus, students organized impromptu discussion circles about the rally. Flyers appeared on bulletin boards overnight. What does accountability really mean? Some professors joined, others stayed away, afraid of controversy. That evening, one of Maya's students sent her a link to a live stream of a follow-up rally. A smaller crowd had gathered, holding candles and signs. A speaker took the microphone and said, "We didn't come here to divide. We came here to remind ourselves that democracy isn't a spectator sport. We all have a part in it." The crowd clapped, but the comments section online told a different story. Some users called it inspiring. Others said it was political theater. Every post was met with an equal and opposite reaction. Later that night, Maya sat at her kitchen table, grading papers she could barely focus on. She opened social media and saw that even her friends were fighting about the rally. One wrote, "Finally people are waking up." Another replied, "This kind of protest just hurts our cause." She closed the app. It felt like everyone was talking, but no one was listening. Clara texted her, "You watching the news? They're calling it the accountability movement now. Half the party's mad, half's cheering." Maya typed back, "It's not the rally that's the problem. It's how people interpret it," Clara replied. "Maybe the truth just doesn't fit into headlines anymore." Across town, Ethan was watching a debate panel on TV. Two commentators were arguing, their voices overlapping. He turned off the sound. He didn't need to hear the words. He already knew the rhythm. Accusation, defense, repeat. He thought about something Maya had said at lunch. "We're afraid of disagreement." Maybe she was right. Maybe that fear was bigger than politics. It was in workplaces, families, even friendships. Everyone was scared to say the wrong thing, so the real conversations never started. The next morning, Maya's students showed up early for class, eager to continue the debate. One of them said, "Professor, do you think this rally will change anything?" She hesitated. "Maybe not right away, but sometimes the change isn't in the policy. It's in how people start thinking about power." The student frowned. "So it's more symbolic than practical?" "Symbols matter," Maya said. "They remind us what we stand for, even if they make people uncomfortable." Outside, a light drizzle began to fall, washing away the chalk slogans students had written on the sidewalks. The words faded, but their meaning lingered in the air. That evening, Maya walked home past a community center where people were gathered in a circle, talking about leadership and trust. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. As she listened from the sidewalk, she realized something important. The rally had rippled far beyond the headlines. It had sparked conversations in classrooms, homes, cafes, places where people had stopped talking for too long. Maybe that was the quiet victory no one was reporting. The rally hadn't just shouted, "No kings." It had whispered something else. "We still care." Maya smiled, feeling a cautious hope rise inside her. Maybe the rally hadn't backfired after all. Maybe it had just done what all real change does. It started messy, misunderstood, and small, but it made people talk. And in times like these, talking might be the first real act of courage. That Friday evening, Ethan invited Maya and Clara to his apartment for dinner. The small space smelled of fresh pasta and garlic, and the city outside was alive with traffic and distant sirens. Ethan had poured wine into 3 glasses, but it wasn't just a meal. It was a chance to unpack the week's events. The No Kings rally and its fallout had dominated their thoughts for days, and now it was time to talk without interruptions, without screens, without headlines screaming for attention. Ethan sat back in his chair, swirling his glass. "I just don't get it," he said. "They call it accountability, but it feels like betrayal. You criticize someone publicly, and suddenly everyone says, they turned on their own. Isn't that, I don't know, counterproductive?" Maya leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "But silence isn't loyalty, Ethan. If you see something wrong and say nothing, it's not protecting anyone. It's letting mistakes continue." The rally was loud because it needed to be. Clara stirred her pasta, looking between them. Maybe the problem isn't the message. Maybe it's the method. Calling it a public confrontation might have made people defensive. They didn't hear the principle. They heard attack. Ethan shook his head. "So what's the right way? Whisper behind closed doors? That never works either. Nobody sees it. Nobody notices it. Change only happens when people are forced to pay attention." "Exactly," Maya said. "But the question is, does making people angry get attention, or does it shut them down? You can inspire some people and alienate others at the same time." Clara sighed, taking a bite. "I think that's the reality of leadership. It's never simple. There's always someone who feels left out, misunderstood, or attacked. You can't make everyone happy, but you can make sure the conversation is honest. The three fell quiet for a moment. Outside, a car honked and a dog barked in the distance. The apartment felt like a bubble of thought in the chaos of the city. Ethan's voice broke the silence. I just hate seeing us fight among ourselves. I mean, look at the news. Every outlet is spinning it differently. People are shouting at each other instead of listening. Maya nodded. True. But maybe that's the point of the rally too. It's forcing a conversation we've avoided for too long. How often do we question authority openly? How often do we hold the people we support accountable? Clara's eyes softened. It's not just about politics, though. This is about human nature. People don't like being told they're wrong, even if they're leaders, even if they have the best intentions. The rally hit a nerve because it forced self-reflection. And self-reflection is uncomfortable, Ethan laughed, half frustrated, half amused. So you're saying discomfort is the point? That we should celebrate it? Not celebrate it, Maya replied, but recognize it. Growth rarely comes from comfort. Change requires friction. Clara leaned back in her chair. Think about families, workplaces, friendships. The same principle applies. We avoid conflict. We avoid criticism. But the problems don't disappear. They fester. The rally was messy, sure, but it started a conversation instead of pretending everything was fine. Ethan paused, swirling his wine. Maybe that's it. Maybe people just hate seeing the truth in front of them. It's easier to get mad than to think about it. Maya smiled faintly. Exactly. And that's why discussions like this matter. It's not about winning. It's about listening, questioning, understanding. That's what democracy is supposed to be. Messy, imperfect, but real. Clara nodded. I read some comments online today. People were saying, the party's tearing itself apart, and we need unity. But unity without honesty isn't unity at all. It's silence. It's pretending everything's okay when it's not. Ethan leaned forward. So how do you balance that? Being honest and holding people accountable without making it a spectacle that divides everyone? Maya paused. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no perfect answer. But maybe the key is intention and empathy. Speak the truth, but speak it in a way that encourages understanding rather than just anger. Make people think, not just react. Clara picked up her fork again. And maybe we need more of this. More conversations in small spaces. Spaces where we can disagree without losing friendship, without making enemies. Places where we learn rather than argue for points. The three sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the idea. Outside, the city lights flickered against the wet streets, and the hum of life continued. Inside, the apartment felt like a different world, a place where complexity wasn't simplified into a headline, and disagreement didn't have to mean division. Ethan finally broke the quiet. You know, maybe the rally backfired because people weren't ready. Not because the message was wrong, but because it hit too close to home. People don't like thinking about their own role in leadership, their own responsibility. Maya nodded. Yes, that's exactly it. It's uncomfortable because it reflects us, not just them. When we see leaders accountable, we're also reminded of our own power to speak, act, and participate. Clara smiled, raising her glass. So here's to conversations that matter, even if they get messy, even if they make people uncomfortable, because that's where real change starts. Ethan clinked his glass against hers. And here's to understanding, even if the world outside can't handle it yet. They laughed softly, and for a few moments, the apartment felt like a haven from the chaos of the headlines. It wasn't about rallies or protests. It was about human connection, reflection, and honesty. Later, as they cleared dishes together, Ethan asked, Do you think people will ever stop reacting and start thinking? Maya shook her head with a small smile. Probably not. But they'll start listening sometimes. That's enough to begin with, Clara added. And maybe that's the real victory. Not winning over everyone, but starting the conversation in a way that lasts. By the time they said goodnight, the city outside was quiet, but their thoughts were alive. They knew the rally's headlines would fade, replaced by new stories and new outrage. But the discussion in Ethan's apartment, honest, slow, patient, was something that couldn't be erased. It was a reminder that meaningful change begins not on stages or in media cycles, but around a table, with friends willing to listen and question together. Walking home, Maya thought about the ripple effect the rally had started. It wasn't just political, it was human. Every uncomfortable conversation, every moment of reflection, was part of a larger lesson. Accountability matters, but so does empathy. Leadership demands honesty, but so does friendship. And in that simple, messy truth, she felt a quiet hope. One that wasn't about winning debates or gaining approval, but about people learning to think, talk, and understand again. That was a victory worth having. A week had passed since the No Kings rally, and the city was slowly returning to its usual rhythm. The headlines that once screamed betrayal and scandal had quieted, replaced by newer stories, fresher controversies, and endless scrolling feeds. Yet, for Maya, Ethan, and Clara, the ripple of the rally hadn't gone away. It lingered in conversations, in thoughtful pauses, in the questions people were finally starting to ask. The news may have moved on, but the debate had only begun in quiet spaces. One evening, the three met at the same cafe where part one of their discussion had begun. The chairs felt familiar, the smell of coffee and pastries comforting, and the hum of soft chatter surrounding them. Maya pulled out a notebook, one she rarely used for lectures. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what actually changes. Headlines fade, opinions flare up, and then everyone moves on. But conversations? Real conversations. They stick," Ethan nodded, stirring his coffee. "That's what I hate about social media. Everyone reacts, no one listens. You scroll past, you click like, you comment, and it's over in seconds." "It feels meaningless," Clara smiled. "But not here. Here, in small spaces, the ripple lasts. People leave thinking, not reacting." They began talking about the rally again, not as a political event, but as a human story. They discussed leadership, accountability, and responsibility, not the kind defined by titles or power, but by the choices people make every day. Maya remembered the candlelight vigil that had followed the rally, small but meaningful. People hadn't shouted slogans or waved flags. They had shared stories, concerns, hopes, and that, she realized, might matter more than any media coverage. "Maybe the rally didn't backfire," Clara said, "because its goal wasn't to be popular. Its goal was to start thinking differently, to challenge assumptions quietly, even if it looked chaotic on TV. Ethan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "So it wasn't about tearing anyone down? It was about reflection, about making people feel responsible." Maya nodded. "Exactly. And that's why people were so uncomfortable. Reflection demands honesty, and honesty demands attention. It's easier to get angry than to examine yourself." They discussed how the online reaction had become a mirror, reflecting not just opinions, but anxieties. Some people accused leaders of failure. Others accused the protesters of disloyalty. Yet beneath all the shouting was a deeper question. How do we participate in systems that feel bigger than us? How do we hold ourselves accountable as citizens, friends, and family members? Clara leaned forward, elbows on the table. "It makes me wonder. Maybe the rally's biggest lesson isn't political. Maybe it's social. Maybe it's about us learning to engage with complexity instead of oversimplifying everything into right or wrong." Ethan laughed softly. "So we should just talk more, argue less, and think harder. That's revolutionary?" Maya smiled. "In a way, yes. Talking with honesty, without fear of offending, without needing applause. That's how change starts. It's small, it's quiet, but it lasts." That night, inspired by the reflections, they decided to start something new. They called it a discussion circle, a monthly gathering open to anyone, where ideas could be shared without judgment. Flyers went up on community boards and online groups. The first meeting was simple. Chairs in a circle, a small table with water, and a sign that read, "Talk, listen, think." The turnout was modest but meaningful. People of all ages and backgrounds came. A retired teacher spoke about civic duty. A young college student shared his fears about the future. A single mother described how accountability looked in her workplace. There was no shouting, no dramatic speeches, just listening, questioning, and reflection. Maya noticed how the conversation shifted organically. When one person expressed anger, someone else offered empathy. When someone made a point, another challenged it thoughtfully, not aggressively. It was messy at times, but in a way that felt productive. People weren't trying to win, they were trying to understand. Ethan, observing quietly, realized something he hadn't before. "The rally may have been loud," he said later, "but this is where the real work happens. In small conversations that change minds, hearts, and habits." Clara nodded. "Exactly. The public drama is temporary. The private reflection is permanent. We've been so distracted by spectacle that we forgot the power of ordinary conversation." Over the next few weeks, the circles continued. Word spread slowly, and each meeting added a new perspective. Some nights were tense, others were filled with laughter. But every time, people left feeling a little more informed, a little more responsible, and a little more hopeful. The ripple grew quietly, steadily. Maya reflected on the students she taught. They had debated fiercely about the rally, some passionately defending leaders, others passionately critiquing them. Yet what mattered wasn't winning arguments, it was learning to think critically. The same principle applied here. The circles weren't about agreement. They were about reflection and engagement. Ethan noticed patterns too. People who initially dismissed the rally as a failure began to attend and participate in these conversations. They realized the lessons weren't about politics. They were about participation, awareness, and empathy. The rally had sparked action that the headlines never could. Clara, ever observant, pointed out another insight. Look at how people respond when they feel heard. They become more open, less defensive. That's the real ripple effect. The rally gave a spark, but these conversations give it depth. One evening, after a particularly moving session, Maya walked home under a sky lit with streetlights. She thought about the news cycle, about how easily public outrage replaced meaningful discourse. But she also thought about the people she had met, students, neighbors, strangers, who were willing to stop, listen, and reflect. And she realized that in those moments, something important was happening. Something quieter, slower, but more lasting than any headline. The rally, she thought, was like a pebble thrown into a pond. The splash was dramatic, but the ripples, the small, expanding circles, were what truly mattered. They moved slowly, touching people who never saw the initial wave. And in each ripple was the possibility of change, understanding, and connection. By the end of the month, the circle had become a steady presence in the community. Some participants were hesitant at first, wary of judgment or conflict, but the atmosphere remained respectful, curious, and patient. People began sharing ideas they had never voiced in public before. They debated ethics, leadership, responsibility, and human behavior. It was a place where questions mattered more than answers. Maya, reflecting on the week, realized that the rally hadn't failed. It had simply done its part. It had drawn attention, sparked conversation, and reminded people that democracy and human connection requires participation. The headlines might fade, opinions might clash, but the act of thoughtful engagement endured. Ethan, watching a small group discuss online privacy and civic responsibility, whispered, "This is better than any protest I've seen. No shouting, no slogans. Just people thinking," Clara smiled. "Exactly. This is how change really grows." As they closed the cafe that night, they understood something simple but profound. The rally was just the beginning. The real impact came afterward, in classrooms, living rooms, cafes, and discussion circles. In every quiet conversation, the lessons lingered. People began to think not just about leaders, but about themselves, their choices, their responsibility, and their willingness to engage honestly with the world around them. The echo of "No Kings" had faded from the headlines, but in its place, a different kind of movement was taking shape. One not measured by clicks, views, or applause, but by understanding, reflection, and the slow, steady work of listening. And in that quiet, persistent ripple there was hope. Not flashy, not loud, but enduring. Maya smiled as she stepped out into the cool night. The city seemed calmer, yet alive with possibility. She knew the headlines would keep coming, each one louder and faster than the last. But here, in these small spaces, people were learning to slow down, to hear, and to think. That, she realized, was the real victory. And in the end, it wasn't about Schumer, the rally, or political parties. It was about human connection, the ability to discuss, reflect, and grow together. That's the kind of change that lasts far beyond a single headline.